Good morning, Naledi, and good morning to the viewers. I think yesterday's budget was not a budget that was, I wouldn't say that it was characterized around the wording of job creation, as it were, because even when I was trying to search for job creation or anything that relates to jobs in the speech, it appears that the minister didn't mention anything specifically in relation to that. But I do think that the speech was characterized by responding to South Africa's prioritization of current risks. And the current risks, or the current country risk in South Africa, the main one has related to the energy question. And of course, if we were to talk about jobs and we were to talk about the support of small businesses that are youth owned and so forth in the speech that was delivered yesterday, it would almost be thinking in a reverse manner if we don't first address the energy question, which I think was by and large the focus of yesterday's speech. However, when you look at some of the annexes from the budget that have been tabled then in terms of the Division of Revenue Bill and of course the Appropriation Bill and the supporting annexures, what we've seen is there's been proposed amendments to the Business Act of 1991 in relation to remote work visas. Now, this I think would be quite critical, specifically for South African startups that are high growth in nature and that are leveraging skills from other parts of the world in order to be competitive and to drive efficiencies within the South African economy. I think that is a plus. When you look at the allocation, we've seen over the medium term over 8 billion rand allocated towards small business development and over 2 billion rand specifically allocated towards township and rural-based businesses, and estimated around 120,000 businesses that they are looking to support there with that 2 billion rand allocation. And so that is where, when you look at the finer detail, that's when we start seeing some of those allocations to drive small business development in effect and the hope of ensuring that there is employment growth and the stimulation thereof.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the amounts that you've just touched on, because I think when you start looking at some of the amounts that were shared yesterday in the budget speech, and you hear 8 billion rand going towards small businesses and 2 billion rand going towards rural small businesses, it sounds like a drop in the ocean. Is that sufficient?
Well, certainly not, Naledi, because I think the challenges that we face of unemployment and, of course, poverty are quite large and quite significant in the South African environment. You alluded earlier to the rate of unemployment in South Africa, which, of course, if we look at the over 2 billion rand that has been allocated towards township and rural-based businesses, if we look at that at a per capita level, that amount at a per capita level for those 120,000 businesses that Treasury is looking to support through that scheme. Now, of course, that becomes quite limited, and there's a need for the crowding in of other resources from the private sector as well, in order to ensure that the resources to support small business growth and development in South Africa is able to really move a needle in the South African context. But additionally, the energy support package, I think as well, is quite crucial in this instance, specifically given the energy crisis. We've seen a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, that have been adversely affected by load shedding and the loss of products, the loss of productivity in the services sector, and of course the logistical constraints. And that ultimately, as we've seen, been reported by the South African Reserve Bank, that it has estimated to close to 1 billion rand in losses per day as a result of the effects of load shedding. Now, this support package, I think, has been quite critical, and this has also been reflected based on Treasury's input, that there will be an amendment to the business, what we knew as the business bounce back scheme, which in essence would facilitate small businesses being able to borrow for the leasing of solar equipment and for the purchasing of solar equipment to really have an alternative source of energy so that a business can continue. Certainly the need is certainly far greater, but I think it is a good step in ensuring that at some level, some of these risks are mitigated.
Well, just outside the City Hall yesterday, Ndumiso, what you had, of course, was labor unions there as well, wanting to see a sort of increase in wages, particularly for public sector wages. And this has been an ongoing battle for months, and one could even say for years, to be quite honest with you. The public wage bill continuing to go up. I mean, how do you think the minister dealt with it, or should have dealt with the issue of wages, particularly for public servants?
Well, I think this has been part of the tough choices that the Minister and, of course, National Treasury have had to respond to in this instance. On the first part, we've seen that the expenditure growth for this fiscal year that has been outlined by the Minister is just over 3%, which, when you look at it from a fiscal policy framework level, is quite prudent in ensuring that there aren't, we don't certainly go over the fiscal edge, as it were, which is quite important because given some of the risks that we've seen from a ratings point of view, from a financial intelligence point of view, there have been certain risks that South Africa has faced, which could lead to an outflow of capital and investment in the South African environment. When you specifically look at the increment in expenditure to just being over 3% in the context of the budget bill, it continues to be a difficult conversation to have, specifically with public sector workers, around whether or not their request of above that 4 or 3% increment, whether or not it needs to be allocated. But I do think in this instance, National Treasury has been prudent in ensuring that there isn't a fiscal leakage in this instance, and it is the bargaining tools that would be leveraged with the public sector unions in this instance would have to reach a point of compromise with National Treasury in this instance, particularly given some of the priorities that we referred to earlier around the country risk that South Africa faces from an energy point of view, and where resources need to be deployed towards those, and of course perhaps over the medium term having a kind of arrangement that would be both suitable for both the public sector unions and, of course, National Treasury. But I think from a risk point of view, the energy crisis should be at the top of the list.
And it seems that it really, really is. And of course, I think we can all agree that until we're able to sort that out, we're not going to see much stability, even in some of our small businesses in our communities that are creating jobs for young people. Ndumiso, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Ndumiso Hadebe, of course, is Chief Economist at KH Equity Partners.